Hello and welcome to Newsroom, brought to you by Insurance Brokers Alliance. This is where we discuss the news from the point of view of our panel. Today we have with us once again journalism tutor Paddy Lewis.
G'day,
welcome back, Paddy. Nice to have you here. And you'll recognise Hunter Andrews, journalist as well.
It's great to be here. Great to be here, Bill.
Always good to have you here. Now, John Key has been making comments of I wouldn't exactly call them an earth-shaking significance about fireworks, but he's been saying things like, well, you know, I think the public sentiment is, and we want to go with the public sentiment on this and banning fireworks, etc. And while I'm not proposing or saying there should be a personal ban today, I think you'll see that, you know, in the future they will that this will happen. The fireworks thing is perhaps not the issue to me. The issue is that he seems to be a master at saying this is what the public wants here. We'll go with what the public wants on a minor issue, creating some sort of persona. But on other issues, and the one that sprung to mind with me was the Alcohol Liquor Reform Act, I forget the actual name of it, last year, where a raft of recommendations came from people, from institutes of people who dealt with young people, from the police, from the health organisers, from everybody who made recommendations. And surveys of the public showed that the law should be changed, and the government ignored it. And yet on something like this, this guy, and I'm talking about John Key here, you've got to hand it to him, don't you? He's a master of the manipulation of public opinion, is he not, Paddy?
Well, it's what happens is, and this is a classic example, a journalist rolls up, and Hunter will back me up on this, and says, Prime Minister, the Aotearoa Anti-Fireworks League has said we should ban fireworks. What do you think? John Key goes, oh, okay. Yeah, well, you know, we could look at that. We might look at it. We'll probably have a look at it. It's something for the future. So it's, you know, saying what people want to hear. And it's leaving enough leverage for that sort of thing. But you've got to ask yourself, I mean, we let off a few fireworks last week, and you've got to ask yourself, what went wrong? What went wrong last week? Did anyone get blown up?
Well, apparently the number of injuries have been decreasing.
Yeah. I mean, we were probably more at risk from me than the fireworks, to be honest. You know, no one got hurt. All we had was the increased level of whinging that comes at this time of year from people who say, oh, my dog got scared, or oh, the young people next door are making too much noise, or oh, there were people drinking and letting off fireworks next door. Did they land in your backyard? Did they hurt your cat? I mean, my dogs are intelligent enough to know that they should go and stay inside when the fireworks are going off. If your dog isn't intelligent enough to do that, tough.
Yeah. What do you reckon, Hunter?
Well, look, I have fond memories of being about 10 or something and going in and buying at Carmody's store in Mosgiel, pohas and you name it, every sort of different explosive. And we were really, and it was for about 3 weeks, I think, a month or something, that the public had free access to explosives over your local shop counter. Yes. And we just had incredible times. God knows how many Airfix airplanes I blew up in the backyard and things, but we were told that you don't hold them in your hand. I mean, it's just sensible things, really. And the students, of course, were having rocket wars where they would have PVC tubes with rockets that they shoved down them. So we've got rid of all those fireworks. We've got rid of the little exploding pohas and Tom Thumbs and things that we always save our pocket money up to get. And we've become, I think we should be allowed. I mean, surely we're responsible enough to, you know, be supervised, or, you know, as you said, Paddy, you know, who blew themselves up? This Guy Fawkes, and, you know, we've got to celebrate that last great Catholic plot, haven't we?
We haven't banned buying petrol and, you know,
that's right. I mean,
look at the potential.
Shh. Look at the potential, though. I mean, you think about things like guys in Mai's drinking while they're shooting ducks and things, you know. I mean, there's certain, I know that the National Party were very big on hitting Labour with the nanny state label when they were in office. And
surely this is what it is, nanny state stuff.
You've got to trust your citizens to have some sort of responsibility. What on earth does it say for us that, you know, we can't be trusted, really?
Yeah. It's guaranteed if it makes a loud noise, if people are having fun, if it's something that someone doesn't like, there's always some whinger out there who will want to ban it. And they'll get onto the media, or they might be lucky enough to if they and if someone asks the question of someone, you're going to have a politician saying, "Oh yeah, let's look at that."
Yeah.
You notice they say, "Let's look at that."
Yeah.
I mean, it looks responsible, doesn't it? It looks really responsible to do that. You know, or someone could get injured. But when you consider, say, for example, I was speaking to someone whose wife is Chinese the other day from mainland China, and he said to me, you know, we allow the Chinese tourists, you know, great, to come here and get a car and drive it. He said, but in actual fact, you buy your licence in China. I said, do you mean go and pay money for it? He said, yeah, if you're wealthy enough, you go and buy one. And so we find that some tourists are coming to the country, driving on the wrong side of the road and actually killing New Zealand citizens. And the accident rate around, you know, in some places around Queenstown and whatnot goes up to 25% of all accidents are caused by tourist doing it. But we've done nothing about it. We don't even say, look, you've got to take a brief driving test up and down this bit of road. We have done nothing about it. Why? Money. That's what my thought is. It's money.
Individual companies are though actually putting stickers on near the speedo going, remember you should be on the left-hand side of the road at all times.
If you can drive in the first place.
And that was a terrible accident in Central Otago the other day when those tourists just drove out into the path of an oncoming car. And, you know, I was thinking to myself, where was it, Luggett? Or
Luggett.
I could think, and I know the intersection, but I could think in a period of absent-mindedness being in Europe and just suddenly for a moment forgetting which side of the road you should be on, and that could have been me. You know, I mean, we all have those moments on the road where we go, geez, do I remember the last kilometre I've just driven? Or, you know, I think the companies are doing what they can, and it'll take for things to escalate for probably some sort of test or something. But at the moment, as John Key says, we can go and drive in other countries all around the world, and we reciprocate that. So it's the risk that we're prepared to take now. But, you know, coming back to fireworks, maybe there should be community organised events, I don't know, but I think that we have to be responsible, and I've seen a few Guy Fawkes evenings now in my life, and nothing has gone wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want the Invercargill City Council to organise something because we know that there'll be a mountain of money poured into a hole and we might get a wet night where they have to call it off. We know they can't organise things like that. Just interesting though, on the cars, you say that the Chinese, you know, can buy a licence.
Yeah.
It's probably a wee bit different to quite a few of the Invercargill drivers I see who got these out of a
raffle
chip packet.
Yeah, it's true.
You know, have you driven through Winton recently? I mean, you know, people just move all over the road there, and you've just got to adapt to it. I just think I'm coming up to Winton, I better be ready for some severe lack of indicating and some serious pulling out.
By a combine harvester.
Well, whatever. Well, generally someone more senior than myself. But
yes, correct.
You know, I mean, you've just got to adapt, and it's an interesting one to watch. And certainly those accidents are terrible, and let's not make light of them. But it's not a burning issue, I wouldn't think.
Yeah. And well, that basically was just my thoughts on the fireworks. A very small issue. Hopefully we don't see any laws to ban them when there's a whole raft of other things which to me are far more important we should have been dealing with. The main one in my mind was actually the alcohol issue, which we've talked before on the show about. And
what's that? The closed door policies? And
Whatever, you know, when we had the alcoholic or sale of liquor reform bill, the government were particularly tardy on some of the provisions which they approved. The police wanted a lot more, and health institutions wanted a lot more. Anybody who dealt with young people wanted a lot more.
From what I've read, lift the age back to 20.
Yep. And we've got, you know, there was just an article here in the paper the other day about young people drinking and saying how that the hospitals in Christchurch, I think Christchurch Hospital did a survey over a period of some weeks, and most of the alcohol-related the patients with alcohol-related problems which were causing them were coming in between 16 and 25 years old. And then there was a mention of young women too, you know, around 16 or 17 years old getting badly intoxicated too. So to me, if you're going to take action against anything which is harming the population, take another look at that.
Wasn't that amazing at Wingatui the other day when the English Rugby League side showed up, and students had all been drinking since sun up, and they quickly retreated, the English Rugby League team. But I've been to events like that and seen what it's like, and it's pretty ugly, but if you don't want to see it, then don't go.
I suppose on an overall perspective, I mean, the volume of alcohol per person aged, I think it's done at the age over 15 has been dropping since 2011, but you've still got a third of all police apprehensions involve alcohol. It's one of those things. It's a bit like fireworks. You can't legislate for stupid. And I mean, I was young once and got amongst it a fair bit. But there's one large group of people who can drink and probably get drunk and have a good time. And then there's that very small group who we see if we go to court, sit in the district court, who can't handle it. And I took the journalism students to court last week. They had to do stories based on the list. And you watch, and those who come through for drink driving offences, for example, who've been there before, they know the drill. They just stand there. There was a guy who turned up. It was his first offence. It was completely banal. He was never going to put anyone in danger, but he was helping some friends out in the space of about, I think it was something like 100 metres. Drove the car. Policeman just happened to be on the street at the time, pulled him over, said, "What are you up to?" And blew the bat. And he looked like his life was over. He stood in the dock.
Yep.
He spent the whole time sitting there like his life was over. These other guys, it's like, oh well, we'll take the fine, we'll take the disqualification, away we go. I think there's two things to it. I think we focus too much on this. If I read a news story about 16-year-olds getting hammered, I think to myself, what do their parents think they're doing? Because I know my parents, and with my kids, I'd be hammering them if they were doing that at that age. The other thing is too that I don't think there's enough effort put into these people. I mean, if you're caught as a third-time drink driver in a reasonably short period of time, you have to go back and reset your licence. But that's about it. You get a bit of a fine. I mean, these guys, if they have to drive any great distance, they're putting anyone else on the road in danger of death.
That's right.
And they should be treated accordingly. The other point that I wanted to make, and I know, sorry, I'm dominating.
You're all right. You're fine. Keep going. Yeah.
I go to any pub in town. There's a particular pubs in town, and the Sale of Liquor Act says that you shouldn't serve people who are drunk. There's signs up everywhere saying we're not going to serve you if you're drunk. Try any pub in town after a certain time on a Friday, Saturday night, and I bet if you breathalyse most of the bar, they'd be well and truly over the limit. There's people in there who are falling over, they're dropping drinks,
Quite obvious.
but they keep getting served.
Well, I have done my manager's licence recently. In fact, it has lapsed, but it was quite an intensive part of the course about that recognising drunk people, and the fact that the other thing they emphasised was how heavily you can be fined. So they're emphasising that as a manager, you're responsible for about up to 10,000 or something like that. And actually, and it's been a long time since I've been out in this town at night, and I would say this would have been about 5 years ago. I did actually go out. It was after a work do, and I'd probably had too much, and the guy just said, "Sorry mate, I'm not serving you," and I turned right round and got in a taxi and went home. And whereas if he hadn't and he had served me, I mean, it would have been a bigger night. But it was a real reality check when this guy looked at me and said, "Sorry mate," and I thought, wow, what the hell do I look like? I better I'm off home, I'll get in the car, get in the taxi, get in the car. The car driven by someone else.
I mean, in the last 10 years, there's only been one licensing trust establishment I've been to, and being involved with rugby, I've probably had a few fair times. There's only one licensing trust establishment that has said to me or the people I'm with, "You've had too much."
Right.
And that's the Kiln. They do it consistently. But the others, it's, got money, come on in.
Right.
And that's where I think Queenstown do it quite a lot with the raid squad. You see managers' licences there getting regularly suspended because they're serving people who are drunk or people who are going on to cause trouble. And I think there's probably a bit of emphasis that needs to be put on that in Invercargill.
Interesting. Well, just to finish this up, I was interested to talk to some university age young people who'd gone from school to university. I asked a few of them, what's your opinion of the Sale of Liquor Act? What should happen? And almost overwhelmingly they said it should be raised up to 21. That's us having been through it, done the drinking or whatever it was at school. They said no. They said it is too young because of the supply falling down from the 18-year-olds down through. They said that's why.
Buying for 15-year-olds.
And you can't get a better opinion certainly it's much better than a parliamentarian's opinion of what should happen, but the young people who've been through it themselves, and they're smart kids, you know, and they said, no, there's no way. There's just no way.
Of course, we all wanted it lowered to 18 when we were...
When you were 16.
Yeah, 18 or whatever, but it seemed sensible, and I've spoken to a lot of police about this, and senior police staff in particular, who say that it's so obvious. It was so obvious when that drinking age was lowered, that sort of escalation of harm to selves, harm to others.
So where does the pressure come from? You know, obviously, who's putting pressure? Because everybody, it seems, putting pressure to change this thing, you know, back to what it was. So why doesn't the Parliament or the government or whoever put it back? Why? Who are they acceding to when they're saying, no, we'll just make mild changes or whatever?
Well,
the liquor companies.
Yes, well, the cynical Hunter would say, I think it is. And I certainly remember when it was questioned, debated, was it 2000? When was it? 2000 we dropped it? Or 99? Or was it later? Okay. Someone saying, well, Queenstown, you know, they can drink when they're 18 in Australia. What are we going to do when they come over skiing? You know, I mean, is that really relevant? They're not going to drink. You know, like if we go to the States and you're 20 and the limit's 21, you don't drink.
You do not drink in this country.
I mean, those are the concessions. Are we giving away concessions for a few thousand, well, maybe 3,000 or 4,000 Australians visiting Queenstown?
And you could argue that because of that, some young people in this country have died. That if those laws had been as they were, with the drinking age 2 or 3 years higher, there is arguably some young people who would not have died through alcohol-related motor accidents, alcohol-related over-intoxication or whatever. You know, they might be alive today. Sticking with Parliament, we've seen security laws described by the press as sweeping changes to the security laws be pushed through Parliament in urgency. And the reason is it was totally necessary to pass legislation before Parliament wrapped up for the summer, according to Defence Minister Jerry Brownlee. So it had to be ripped through Parliament there. And he did say later on that the threat level had been raised from very low to low. So, and in this legislation, we've basically seen that some people, anybody who thinks they might go and fight for the Islamic State can have their passport cancelled or removed, and up to 3 years. There's some stuff about video surveillance with the security service. The one which the opposition commented on was that the SIS could now, they had a lot of new powers, and one of them was that they could carry out surveillance on somebody without a warrant for up to 48 hours. Does the fact that our threat level has gone from very low up to low justify this, Hunter?
Where was it in 1985 or 6 when Alain Mafar and Dominic Perrier committed the last act of terrorism on New Zealand soil and blew up the Rainbow Warrior? Right. You know, I mean, what is the real threat? Although, on the other hand, I think absolutely, it may say that our judicial system's so slow moving that you can't get a warrant. If you do pick something up within a social network, like a conversation, like someone going, it's all on tomorrow, operation blah blah, we'll see you at blah blah, I think they should be able to act really quickly to isolate that person and trace back their communications and who they've been communicating to, because who wants the situation that we've just seen in Canada, where a gunman was wandering around Parliament? A lot of people say, I don't want them looking at me, but don't mention parliamentary attacks, or, you know, if you go, honestly, just don't do something stupid, and you won't expect to be followed.
And that's right. I mean, from a strategic focus, we're not really going to be a target for terrorism, but, however, I don't think that anyone, most Kiwis won't be affected by this, and I don't think most of them will mind, because I think they'd rather have that than having some nutter with a beard hacking their head off for a video, to be live streamed on video. And I think, it's still got to go through the select committee process, even though that is truncated.
It'll be softened up, probably.
Yeah, and, the other thing is, and I can't remember who said it, but I think it was the Director General of the GCSB, was that urgent surveillance had to be justified after the fact. So it's not like, hey, Hunter's having a Playboy pool party at his place, let's do some urgent surveillance there.
I couldn't make one.
They'd have to justify that afterwards. So you can't just do the urgent surveillance without a warrant
Forget
and then
it.
go.
So they've got to be able to go back to the judge and say we did this, and the judge says okay because
you're
okay.
away on a golfing holiday and it was going to take too long.
Well, the opposition, it seems, isn't opposed to it. Well, they going to be.
And again, I think
they're going to oppose it in Parliament anyway.
I mean, we've seen that. Like I said, we're not a strategic target for terrorism, but there's enough loopies out there who seem to, I see it on social media every day. People who are asking questions. How do I make contact with Islamic State? How do I become a Muslim so I can go and fight in Syria? It's like,
we're probably under more threat from ourselves than anybody else.
I think that there would be a lot of sympathy for New Zealand if there was, heaven forbid, some sort of attack in New Zealand, because we are seen as that nice sort of neutral stance Western democracy, and it would evoke a lot of sympathy, and we wouldn't be a prime target, I wouldn't think, touch wood, but stranger things have happened in New Zealand, as I said, in the 80s.
They just pull the cork, they need a bunch of frogmen to pull the cork out to sink our navy and things like that. I mean, that's about it.
On that happy note, we're going to take a break. Stay with us. When we come back, there's a lot of more things we're going to be talking about as well. Welcome back to Newsroom. Gentlemen, I've got a question for you. Have you still been taking your tea break?
I haven't had a tea break since, when did I start work? 1984.
Right.
I don't think
You're probably due for one, Paddy.
Well, I don't see the point.
You'd have a lot of crude.
I will have a lot of crude, and I may be going back to former employees.
You could have 4 months off.
You're going to take them all off in one go.
To be honest, I never saw the point. I started my working career in a place where you could have a tea break, but it wasn't really appropriate. Then I went to work at the Housing Corporation, and they encouraged tea and afternoon tea breaks.
Right. They had work breaks.
But there was a woman whose first name I can't remember, but it was something like Adolf, who she was old as the hills, scared the bejesus out of me, and I didn't want to be going into the tea room when she was there.
Right.
So and since then, I've always worked in jobs where it was.
I just go and make a coffee on the go, and I'm still working while I do it.
The government's introduced this legislation, which of course includes there's lunch breaks included as well, and also they have written into the legislation that employers no longer have to collectively bargain, or if they do, they can walk away and not come back. And then anybody who goes on strike, or like a partial strike, they can dock 10% of their wages, which I suppose could be justified. But they've said a statement by the Minister, which is Michael Woodhouse, was flexible and balanced employment relations legislation is essential for business growth. So basically they are saying that this is essential for businesses to grow, that some people don't have the right to have a tea break anymore. And their story is that it can be negotiated in your contract. Well, my question is, for those people who are out of work, seeking work, queuing up in the job queue at an employer, are they going to go in there and say, right, I'm not taking this job unless I can negotiate it, have a proper tea break? Who are the ones, and it's not just the tea break, it's the whole lunch and stuff like that, and being made to work through it, maybe repetitive jobs. There's not even toilet breaks now, I don't think. Who are the ones who are going to suffer?
So everyone's going to, just collapse at work and wear nappies?
I'm selling catheters. I've gone into the catheter business.
I mean, to me, it seems to be...
There'd be some pretty ruthless employers,
yeah.
wouldn't you think?
I don't think... It never needed to be written into the law in the first place. I mean, how many places have you worked where you've said, I'm going to go and get a cup of tea, and they said, no, can't do it?
Well, apparently there are places.
Yeah, but I think it's sledgehammer.
Not the places you and I would work at.
Sledgehammer to crack a nut sort of thing. I can't think of, and I've dealt with over the years, worked alongside or dealt with some fairly difficult employers, shall we say, and they know, I mean, it's 10 o'clock, okay, time for a cuppa. They're not going to begrudge people. I mean, if you can see, again, revoking the law is almost a bit like a sledgehammer to crack a nut as well, because they were saying, well, you don't want someone in the bomb squad saying, bugger, it's 10 o'clock, I've got to have my tea break.
Absolutely not.
When there's 10 seconds left on the timer.
Or an air traffic controller.
Yeah, or a pilot who's on final approach going, oh God, well, we'll just...
Well, why not direct the law towards that sort of industry and just say that where it is necessary that person remains on that job, absolutely necessary, then it applies to them. But everybody else, it doesn't apply.
And I'm pretty sure that's what the clauses say. That's what the bill says.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. No, It does say that you have to negotiate it in your contract to actually get it.
But they do refer to specific industries.
Yeah, well, they refer to the specific industries, but the legislation is not specific to those industries. Yeah, you know, it's an interesting comment made by Mark Dawson, who's the editor of the Wanganui Chronicle. He said he talks about multinational corporations, and he's concerned about those. He said, big corporations, internationals. He said their staff are not people, but a unit of cost, and their responsibility is not to look after their workforce, but to maximise financial returns to shareholders and other investors. Not to mention to ensure the executives retain their fat salaries. Good bit of bias there. Some of these organisations have notoriously exploited cheap labour in the third world countries where no union protection exists, and New Zealand is not immune. Think the fast food industry and seasonal migrant workers from this guiding mantra of taking as much as possible and paying as little as possible. He's making the point that some of these corporations that employ people here, when they've been employing people overseas, have not treated them well. So saying, should we now expect see the same sort of trend occurring in New Zealand from these outfits because they are no longer restrained by New Zealand law?
No, they still have to follow our laws.
Well,
they still have to follow our employment.
Yeah, well, they have to follow those, but no longer restrained by this law, which is to give somebody a lunch break or a tea break or a toilet break or whatever.
Breaks are still written into the employment legislation. They're still in there. Nothing's really changed other than the fact that it was codified beforehand and now it's not, or it's been changed.
Mm-hmm. Or you can opt not to have them but be paid for that time, wasn't it?
You can opt not to have them but be paid for that time.
God, I would have cleaned up over the years.
You would have. You should take those 4 months of tea breaks.
I'm going to take a retrospective personal grievance.
It's a heck of a lot of tea to actually drink in one go.
Mark Dawson, by the way, he's probably just jealous that the Wanganui Chronicle, Wanganui in general, is never going to have any multinational businesses.
You think he's got a personal axe to grind there?
Oh, I just think, Wanganui, the best thing going for Wanganui is the river. They should just push the whole town in there and start all over again.
I can hear people switching off.
If you're watching from Wanganui, feel free to just fucking email and say how much you disagree with Paddy.
Booking tickets.
I'm sure you won't agree.
Invercargill from Wanganui.
To me, the collective bargaining one, the ability to walk away from collective bargaining is probably more serious. Collective bargaining is one of the recognised features of our industrial relations system that has kept people's wages reasonably high and recognised as so, and in successful countries as well. The government seems determined to put less power in the hands of the unions and more power in the hands of the employers. For whatever reason, I don't know. But obviously, it seems some people have pointed out when you put more hands in the power of the employers, you push wages down, which seems to be contrary to their stated ideal of having a higher wage economy. And so they take away one of the tools which has been effective in raising wages, and that is, or they've weakened the tool of collective bargaining. What do you think about that? True or not?
I think that if you want to get good workers, you've got to be good to them. I mean, surely there's a point where companies sink so low that they've got such a rapid turnover of staff that it soon becomes apparent they're spending all their time training disgruntled workers or new disgruntled workers. Surely that's got to have an impact on the bottom line. If you've got a happy, coherent workplace that's happy to show up each day, surely that means something for the shareholder.
Perhaps then we're talking about...
I mean, what businesses are we talking about that act like this?
Well, I can't.
I mean, I'd love to hear.
Name any.
But
because the legislation is really only the legislation's only been passed, so we've got we've got no employer making...
Let's face it, the caregivers who are definitely worth more an hour than they're getting are on minimum wage anyway, so what room for negotiation is there anyway? I mean, we're really exploiting in that sector usually middle-aged women who have taken time out and brought up families, so that time away from the family, time away from their family, who haven't had that time in the workplace, who enter at entry level in their 40s. And so we're exploiting their need for work.
And that's the kind of group who I think are going to suffer. When you make legislation like this, you don't find groups of professionals like us, we don't suffer. It is those people who are perhaps unskilled, who are queuing up for jobs and don't have the bargaining power. Now, you talked before about having happy with those people who've got bargaining power. If you've got bargaining power, you actually don't need any legislation. The CEOs of the power companies don't need legislation to protect them. So somehow they're so incredibly valuable they need $200,000 pay rises. But it's those ones who really don't have bargaining power and are finding difficulty getting work. I think that's where we're going to see that expansion of that gap between the well-paid and the poorly paid, and we have seen that gap widening. It's widening, and that's why it's widening in my mind.
But let's not forget too, with that change, the unions aren't entirely free of blame. I mean, they can be bombastic at bargaining time as well, to the point where they're the ones that are holding up the process. So I guess this kind of makes it, instead of the unions and a lot of union negotiations I've been involved with over the years, they come at it from a very negative, what's in it for us
Is that the old
approach.
Unions though, Paddy?
No, this is in the last 10 years.
Okay.
Very much a what's in it for us, what's in it for our workers approach, rather than saying, right, this is your chicken sexing factory, what can we do to help you run it better, and how can the workers share in that? They don't come to it with a positive attitude at the negotiating table.
Interesting. We'll have to see where this one actually goes, and if we do see a trend, as time goes by, where the poorly paid are more poorly paid in terms of the relative wealth of the country, and the more highly paid get even more highly paid, because that's where the way the trend's going at the moment. We have been rated New Zealand's been rated as the third most prosperous country in the world, behind Norway and Switzerland. So has it got anything to do with...
Do you mean per head capita, or...?
I guess it is. It's average, on average.
Right.
On average. Could it be anything to do with having mountains? I don't know. Third most prosperous country in the world. So clearly, on average we're doing okay, but does the average indicate... how does this sit with the fact that we have got a lot of organisations and people saying around the country this government has got to deal with poverty? So we've got this force on one hand saying you've got to deal with poverty because it has become a very real issue, and these are professional people.
Well, it's becoming an enormous cost, isn't it?
An enormous cost,
seems to be the ultimate when children's health suffer and things.
Unfortunately, on the prosperity index, that's one of the things that people say we do well on. We're second on the social capital sub-index, with 96% of New Zealanders able to count on friends and family in times of need. So on that, and far as the prosperity index goes, and I'm the first to be a cynic about these things, but that actually says that, hey, we're actually doing all right.
Interesting.
In that regard.
Because not everybody's actually saying that.
No.
The Children's Commissioner, he identified... the Children's Commissioner 2 years ago produced the most comprehensive analysis of child poverty in New Zealand and identified, we'll come to housing in a minute, but that has been some real issues been identified there.
Again, the Children's Commissioner report was shown to have flaws.
Yeah.
At the Children's Commissioner, the Ministry for Women's Affairs, with all due respect to feminists out there, what is the point of these government organisations? They're there to turn out reports like this that justify their existence. We need real data, not the stuff that they're producing so they can suck up more taxpayers' dollars. And I think until we get that real data and proper scientific analysis, we can't do anything about it, because you've got different groups like the Children's Commissioner, like the Mana Party did I think it was the Mana Party who had a report. They're identifying different groups and saying these people are in poverty, but they don't agree. So we need,
But do we just sit on our hands and do nothing because they can't agree?
I don't think you can do anything without proper research. I mean, for example, my youngest son is at a school where the Greens or the Labour Party wanted to give him breakfast. He has a perfectly good breakfast at home. Why are we doing a shotgun approach where this would be better being targeted, and we need to identify the people
approaches are always better, aren't they?
who are best going to, because as much as my son would love getting another feed at about 8:45 in the morning, he doesn't need it.
Particularly if it means staying out of the classroom for a while.
Yeah, exactly.
I remember that. Now, okay, let's just consider this in terms of Bill English's latest move to get rid of, sell off a lot of state housing. His idea is, let's get rid of the state housing and
farm it out to social
to social housing.
Specialise in that area.
Yeah. And it was interesting to read John Armstrong from the New Zealand Herald. I think he's their chief journalist or something there. He was saying, well, what's going to happen here when we start? Who's going to be the winner from this restructuring of social housing? Pointing out the fact that outfits who would then be administering it, having taken it over, certainly can't afford to buy it off the government at market prices, and so it's going to be sold to these people. It's going to have to be sold off at somewhat below the market prices. And what does that create? Is that just like selling off the power companies as they did at a cut rate? Now they're worth a whole lot more. And the public purse becomes the loser in the meantime.
Well, so what the government's saying is that they would rather pay people rent subsidies than actually subsidise the houses they're living in initially. And that the cynic in me says, well, that makes good sense because a lot of people in New Zealand have become property investors, and I think recent stats have confirmed that in Auckland. I think it was 40% of purchasers were property investors, and that's what we've been indoctrinated to do. I think that we have to more think of let's live in the house, not off the house, and that sort of brings back capital gains. But we've got a mindset in New Zealand that owning property is the be-all and end-all. If you retire, it's good to have 3 or 4 investment properties as your nest egg, and that has to change because, surely the best thing to be doing would be having people in. I think that I hope that we still debate a capital gains tax at some stage. I know that Labor will probably walk away from it because it proves so well. Maybe their handling of conveying what the capital gains tax wasn't good enough. But I think we have to start thinking about other things to do with our money rather than accumulating property. And so there's always going to be people renting. So when you've got people renting, you need to subsidise their rent, especially in Auckland. People getting $300 a week, $200 a week in subsidies for the rents, that money's going directly to property investors. And
apparently it is the case in Auckland at the moment that a lot of the house purchases are being made by property investors.
You've got to have $800,000 or $1 million.
Who are expecting to make a capital gain. And so because they've invested so much in the property, they want high rents. So where is that high rent coming from? As you suggested, a rent subsidy. And where does that come from?
Our taxes.
Our taxes. So our taxes are supporting the high rents in Auckland, which are being charged so that the investors can get a return from the investment in their building over property for which they paid too much. And so in that respect, we're actually supporting.
It looks like a job well done at the end of the day.
It does look like a job well done. And the question's been asked, when is this housing bubble up there going to burst? And see
today the Reserve Bank has said they're not going to shift LVRs because they believe that things like people coming into the country will cause more inflationary issues in housing. So I think they're big, and nice to hear Sarah Dowie, our new MP down here, in her maiden speech saying, go and have a look, young people, or have a look at the prices down here. And I read an item in the Herald about a month ago saying a young couple came down, he got a job in a sawmill somewhere, she got another job somewhere else, and they bought a house for $95,000.
And it was
a perfectly respectable dwelling, you know. And so And which brings me to really my topic of interest today, which was a guy called Bob, his name escapes me, sorry, Bob Neville, who spoke today at the Community Trust about reinvigorating communities that are dying, that we've got all around Southland. There are small towns with ageing populations, and that terrible term zombie towns where it's all just going to end. I mean, we've got to shift our focus and say, look, this is crazy in Auckland. It's a great place to live, I'm sure. I don't want to live there myself, but I'm sure a lot of people see it as a great place. But you've got to take that mindset out and go, hello, well, there are actually really affordable places in New Zealand, cities that have got great infrastructures for sporting, whatever the weather may be a bit colder, but wear a bit of merino. I mean, maybe that emphasis on that drag to Auckland, and don't ignore Auckland because it is the powerhouse of the New Zealand economy, but there are other places in New Zealand where there is affordable housing.
They say it's the powerhouse.
Well, it is. That's where everything's turned into money up there. Yeah,
but it doesn't have to be up there. It's not where the money's in.
Well, it's all about trends, isn't it?
Yeah.
If young couples go, well, yeah, actually, it's pretty silly to be saving for an $800,000 house. We have to get $200,000 when we could buy our house outright for $110,000, $120,000 in Invercargill, and take the hit. Maybe your income would be a bit less. And I know people that have moved down from up north that have taken hits with their incomes, but they're quite happy to do it because they've got a great lifestyle.
Take note, if you're watching from out of town, we love it down here. Auckland, there's definitely a lot of money turns over in Auckland because there's a lot of population up there. But if you remove the agricultural sector from the economy of the GDP figures, you remove the agriculture, you remove tourism, if you remove what the smelter generates and a few things like that, and have a look at what's left. A lot of what's going on in Auckland is what happens in a lot of big cities. It is money movement to support people actually living there. In other words, if they're all living there, well, they've got to have a supermarket. And so, it's a self-generating, it's a self-sustaining industrial spot in many respects. And they've got industry up there, they're manufacturing some things. But I don't actually think they're as important to New Zealand as what a lot of people say.
I'm listening to national radio as I'm walking into work in the morning. Well, usually it's beautiful weather, of course, being in Invercargill. And listening to, well, it'll take you 45 minutes to get in from Henderson to the city centre or something, and I'm just thinking, well, here I am walking, from 20 minutes away from a house that cost me $130,000 into my workplace.
Can't compare the lifestyle.
What do you value out of life? Being able to grow a slightly more tropical garden up north and spend an extra hour a day.
Well, if in fact, Hunter, you could afford a property which had a garden on it.
Well, that's the other thing. We're going to see apartments up there. Auckland will become the city of apartments.
There are no quarter-acre paradises left in Auckland.
No, they're all split up, aren't they?
Exactly. We love it down here. Stick with us. We'll be back in a minute.
Some sort of
taking
ad
a break.
for Invercargill.
Welcome back to Newsroom. We're still talking about social housing. Now, I'm just going to read a quote here from the Herald by John Armstrong. It says, the private providers have English over a barrel, that's Deputy Prime Minister. They know he will have to hand Housing New Zealand stock over to them at a substantial discount to its true value to entice them to enter the market at enough numbers to make a difference. You disagree with this, Paddy?
Yeah, I think
John's
been too long in the press gallery for a start, but I worked in senior management and social housing in London, and when you say social housing in the UK, like Hunter said, everyone
is this council housing or?
No, it's a wee bit different.
Right, okay.
What everyone thinks of tower blocks, but it's not that. So what they do there is that the councils used to own a lot of housing. They realised that it was, a wee bit messy to have that on their books, and so there were things called housing associations that were set up that are independent social housing providers. Now they had some very clear rules set around them by the legislation, so that they couldn't. I'm pretty sure it was not for profit. Yeah, it was not for profit. The housing associations and so on and so forth. So the councils, by and large, started moving stock off to them. But the great thing about housing associations was that, say, a school closed, and I know it's a wee bit different in London because they're all beautiful old buildings, but we would get a school, and they'd say, "Hey, look, how many flats or houses can you put on here?" We'd look at the site, and the last one that I was involved in, we did something like 18 two-bedroom flats, 6 3-bedroom houses, and kept all the original features. So it looked, it was really well done. People go in, they get lower than market rents. They have to meet criteria, same as with the Housing Housing New Zealand here. And so that was the way to do it. And it worked really well because you could use those old buildings that, were closing down schools. We had council buildings. And it was done in a way that it fitted in with, you could integrate everything. So you had the social welfare integration, you had the health integration, you had education. So, you were able to, our staff were able to work with these people, not as tenants, but say, hey, look, we can jack up, or the dental nurse is going to be on site tomorrow, they'd have the mobile dental unit, bring your kids down, need a hand with your dole application or help finding a job. And so it was all wrapped up in one package. And I see that here we just can't seem to get our heads around that a private provider, just because it's a private provider, doesn't mean that it's some dirty old capitalist who's come to rip the guts out of the government. And it can be done with the right legislation. I think it can be done very well, similar to the UK model. The Wellington City Council's seen it already. They've already set up what's called a community housing provider under what the government's proposing, and they're already partnering with property developers and people who've land banking and stuff like that to get into it right at the outset. So I think it's a really good idea, and I think the naysayers see it from the perspective of that a Bob Jones is going to come and go, righto, I'll buy all that state housing, give you that, and then they
charge exorbitant rents.
Well, do what you guys were talking about. So if the right controls are put in place, the right legislation's put in place, I mean, the UK model worked really well, and to the point where we also had an offshoot that was for tenants who could buy their property. So it was a for-profit, but it helped them. So if they were in a property, the tenant could come and say, look, can we buy this? And we might say, no, you can't buy that one because we really need to keep that because it's a 5-bedroom. But we've got another 5-bedroom, 10 minutes away that we can sell you. And they'd go in under a shared equity scheme.
Yep.
So, and it was the New Zealand government's done this in the past with the State Advances Corporation.
They have.
And it works. People pay, the State Advances Corporation, I think, had the greatest or the least number of defaults on mortgages.
Yep.
So long as it's not being subsidised and it's done in the right way, I mean, it can really work.
Yep. In fact, we've got, just listening to you then, I was thinking, well, in a way, some of our seniors' retirement villages and whatnot sort of work like that, do they not?
Yep.
Would they not? Would that be the case? And they are definitely run by private providers, be it the PS, the Presbyterian Social Support Network, and Bupa and places like that. So it does seem to be working at that level.
It must be working because, I mean, apparently Richie McCaw invests significant amounts of his income in rest homes.
Right.
So he sees it as
also profitable
growth industry.
Yeah. Right. Do we finish off on your topic of interest, Hunter?
Well, actually, I was going to talk about maybe some sort of change, which will probably happen now, that if you are convicted of a crime and you use another name, there is a little bit of research done into whether you've actually got a birth name that's completely different. That may be quite sensible. I actually thought...
You're thinking, of course, of Philip John Smith?
Yeah, well, I actually thought that this sort of carry-on would have been happening years ago.
Yes.
Just the amount of information sharing that we as the public think is going on isn't going on between departments at all.
We imagined that it was, didn't we?
I would have hoped that Internal Affairs and the Justice Ministry or Corrections will now link up and go, well, we've arrested this guy, his driver's licence says blah, blah. We've asked them to make a declaration of if they're known by any other name, can you make sure that they're not? Or, the fact that people can get a licence under another name, and I've actually done it. My mother remarried in the mid-80s. I changed from Hunter Gray to Hunter Andrews. Never did it by deed poll. I can't leave the country without being Hunter Gray, though.
Oh, right.
My passport is Hunter Gray, but I have a driver's licence called Hunter Andrews.
Just
Right.
watch this internal affairs, just in case he tries.
Yes, right.
I mean, the thing that
Yeah,
worries
well,
me.
you know, I'm just saying that
Yeah.
that happened, but it wasn't intentional.
No,
It was just
no,
that was what I was
when you're
calling
allowed.
myself, and I got my driver's licence
Yeah.
as Hunter Andrews, and that's what I'm known as.
Yes.
But when I travel overseas, I'm Hunter Gray.
Right, because that's your actual
That's
name.
my real name,
Yeah.
and that's what he did.
Yeah. Well, I actually think that we all imagined that what you're describing was actually going
Yeah,
on.
yeah.
I think we did.
Yeah.
And perhaps only those people who were in those positions, who are now embarrassed, knew that it wasn't. And the question is, can you actually blame them? And we're talking here about the Philip John Smith affair, where that criminal left the country. I mean, are they really the responsible ones, or is it the responsibility of the legislators or somebody in higher positions who never moved
Well,
in
I
that
think
direction?
there's got to be that you can't just acquire. I can't remember how I acquired a driver's license. I think I signed a declaration with a JP saying that I was now known as Hunter Andrews
Yes.
and wanted to be known. But somewhere on the record, it should have been noted that guy was actually born Hunter
Yes.
Gray.
Yes, right.
But I mean, it shows. The thing that worries me is how many less high-profile criminals have done the same thing. I mean, it's like corrections. The more that the story grows legs,
Yeah.
There was
Makes
another
more
guy recently, a 60-year-old, who had been involved in the same sort of crime. Remember that? It was in the paper a while ago that he'd flicked out of the country as well.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
But they
yeah.
caught him.
Got him. Yeah, good.
But yeah, all it shows is that corrections is a basket case. The more the story goes on, the
Yeah.
more mistakes they've made, and it's simple stuff that members of the public would expect them
Yeah,
to.
and we only see it when something like this
Yeah.
happens. That's
Yep.
the thing I worry about. It's like squeeze everything till the pips squeak. Well, the pips are squeaking
Yes.
right now.
And it's, I mean, I can't believe that the Commissioner for Prisons, for a start, Jeremy Lightfoot, tried to blame the police.
Yeah.
You know, it was on his watch. They basically opened the door and said, "See you, mate."
Yeah.
He
See
was
in a few
running his
days.
business in prison as
Yeah.
Traynor.
You wonder
He was
how-
using that
how does
name
that
to run a
happen?
fraudulent business within prison.
But he needed to run his business so he could make enough money
No,
to
to
escape
get out
to
all fair
Brazil.
enough. That's free enterprise, isn't it?
Yes, exactly.
Astounding.
Yeah, it's just
Watch this space.
I didn't
Brazil is
think.
not a country I would travel to if I was known for that sort of crime. There may be certain elements over there that might decide to
Well,
take the
let's
law into
see if they
their own
get it.
hands.
It's surprising how far you can get when you get to Brazil, though, because
Okay.
you've got
I mean,
you can
let's-
get as far as
yeah.
Canada if you want.
That's
Oh, okay.
right, and they say his passport's been cancelled, but how many checkpoints are there that are in a dodgy part of Guatemala or something that don't have that internet
Yeah.
connection? They just
He
look
won't get
at your
through the
photo
US, yeah.
and look at you and go, yeah, through you go, mate.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've crossed a South American border without showing my passport.
right.
How recently?
A
Oh,
while
a couple
ago.
weeks ago.
A while ago. But, yeah, it
While you were
can be
Nazi
done.
hunting in Latin America.
Well, even some funny things happen on the New Zealand borders sometimes. We were leaving for the United States on a trip to see family a few years ago, and a very officious lady in Auckland Airport was telling us to move between the white lines, said we do everything absolutely perfectly here. And a couple of minutes later, my stepson did go through and leave the country with a passport that said he was a female. Well, he clearly wasn't, which we thought quite funny, but we couldn't get it changed at the last minute, so I said just walk through and look female. So yeah, we had a bit of a snigger there, so it does happen. Yes, so that's your lot, is it, Hunter? You're all done?
Yep.
Paddy, now, did you bring another topic of interest, or was that last one yours?
Yeah, no. I although I'm with Hunter on that. The thing that is sort of a couple of days ago, I was cleaning up my office and I discovered some minutes from the ILT that one of my students had requested under the Official Information Act last year. Discovered that the ILT hasn't been following the correct procedure for going into public excluded.
Right.
And I just thought to myself, it's another example. We've got the ILT, we've got the ICC. They can't follow the simplest governance, democratic processes. And a lot of people say, oh yeah, but it doesn't really matter, it doesn't really hurt. But if they can't do that, what else are they missing? And I think Tim loves to just push things under the carpet or say it's not his responsibility. But I think there's a real crunch coming that a big decision is going to be made, most likely by the City Council, and due process is not going to have been followed, and ratepayers are going to bite the bullet for it. And I think it's a real concern, and it's time that councillors and the ILT members as well, with their small problem, really need to step up and look at the governance processes.
It's good to see a couple of councillors really asking questions and perhaps making themselves unpopular at the moment, because they're questions which need to be asked.
Well,
and we always need to have our councillors held accountable. I mean, the council's held accountable, don't we?
Well, Karen Arnold, who I have regular fights with,
Yeah.
she asked questions and immediately got carpeted in the Mayor's column in the paper.
Yeah.
I mean,
I saw that.
What sort of... That's almost as bad as what you discussed with in regard to Councillor Dennis and his rant at Councillor Pottinger. It's just ridiculous, and it's not acceptable. But the problem is that we're very apathetic in Invercargill.
We'll follow this one up. We've got to go. We've run out of time, but it will be a topic maybe when you're back, Paddy, for a much bigger and longer discussion. Thank you for being with us this week. We always appreciate it, and look out for us in a couple of weeks' time. We'll see you later.